Could the big, beautiful bill be America's financial undoing? Promising growth but cutting crucial programs, this controversial legislation has sparked fierce debate. Today, we dive deep into its true impact. Will it boost prosperity or bankrupt the nation? Stay tuned to uncover the facts behind the headlines. Overview of the Big Beautiful Bill and its legislative journey. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act represents a sweeping overhaul of U.S. tax and spending policy, championed as a cornerstone of President Donald Trump's second-term agenda. The legislation advanced through Congress in a highly polarized environment, passing the Senate by a 51-50 margin, with the Vice President casting the deciding vote and clearing the House with a 218-214 tally. The bill was signed into law on July 4, 2025. Its passage was marked by strong Republican support and universal opposition from Democrats. The act encompasses hundreds of provisions, including adjustments to taxes, entitlement programs, and federal spending priorities, making it one of the most consequential legislative packages in recent history. Key tax changes, permanent tax cuts, deductions, and their beneficiaries. The Act enshrines permanent extensions of the individual tax rates originally set in 2017, preventing their scheduled expiration. The standard deduction is nearly doubled, reducing taxable income for many households. A notable feature is the federal income tax exemption for tips up to $25,000 annually, phasing out for higher earners. The child tax credit is increased to $2,200 per child, with eligibility expanded. Retirees benefit from a $6,000 income deduction, plus a temporary $4,000 senior deduction through 2028. These measures collectively deliver over $4.5 trillion in tax reductions, primarily benefiting middle-income families, small businesses, and higher earners, while also expanding deductions for business investments and pass-through entities. Impact on Medicaid and healthcare funding cuts. The bill introduces a 12% reduction in Medicaid spending, amounting to a projected $1.02 trillion cut by 2034. Analysts warn that these reductions could result in at least 10.5 million Americans losing health coverage. The legislation targets what proponents label as wasteful spending, but critics highlight the risk to vulnerable populations, including the elderly and individuals with disabilities. States may be forced to reduce optional benefits, such as home and community-based services, leading to longer wait times and possible hospital closures. The funding cuts are expected to cause layoffs among healthcare workers and increase financial hardship for low-income families, potentially resulting in thousands of preventable deaths. Changes to Social Security taxation and benefits. Significant adjustments are made to Social Security taxation. Most retirees with annual incomes below $60,000 or $120,000 will be exempt from federal taxes on their benefits starting in 2025. An enhanced $6,000 deduction for those over 65 and $12,000 for married couples is available through 2028. However, these changes do not fully eliminate taxes on Social Security benefits, as up to 85% of benefits can still be subject to taxation depending on total income. While the measures offer relief to middle and upper income retirees, the poorest recipients see little change. Critics argue this tax reductions could hasten the depletion of the Social Security Trust Fund. Effects on food assistance programs like SNAP. The legislation brings major changes to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. Eligibility requirements are tightened, with increased work-hour mandates and reduced benefit durations in some states. These adjustments are projected to eliminate SNAP benefits for tens of thousands of recipients and reduce aid for many more, disproportionately affecting rural communities, veterans, and families in economic transition. Food banks anticipate greater pressure as federal support wanes, raising concerns about rising hunger and food insecurity. States with high SNAP participation, such as Texas and New York, are expected to experience the most significant impacts, with advocacy groups warning of deepened hardship for low-income households. Education and workforce program budget reductions. The legislation enforces significant cuts to education and workforce development funding, trimming approximately $150 billion over the next decade. These reductions affect federal grants for K-12 schools, vocational training programs, and higher education initiatives aimed at improving skill development. Programs supporting low-income students and adult learners face scaling back, potentially limiting access to scholarships and job placement services. Workforce training funds, particularly those targeting displaced workers and emerging industries, are also curtailed. Critics argue these cuts could undermine efforts to close skill gaps and reduce unemployment, especially in economically distressed regions. Proponents claim the savings will help balance the budget and incentivize states to innovate education funding models independently. Provisions affecting agriculture and farm subsidies. The bill introduces revisions to agricultural policy, including modifications to farm subsidy programs. It reduces direct payments to large agribusinesses while increasing support for small and mid-sized family farms through targeted grants and low-interest loans. Crop insurance programs see tightened eligibility criteria, aiming to curb fraud and reduce government exposure. Additionally, funding for conservation initiatives and rural development is trimmed, though some resources are redirected to promote sustainable farming practices. These changes seek to balance fiscal responsibility with support for rural economies, but some farmers express concern over reduced safety nets during volatile market conditions and climate challenges. Hold on a second. Do you believe the bill's energy incentives will shape our future? Comment below and let me know your perspective. The bill's influence on the national debt and federal deficit. The legislation is projected to increase the national debt by approximately $4 trillion over the next decade, primarily due to expansive tax cuts and spending on entitlement programs. While proponents argue that economic growth stimulated by the bill will offset some debt accumulation, independent analyses suggest the deficit will widen significantly. The Congressional Budget Office estimates annual deficits rising to over $2 trillion in certain years, raising concerns about long-term fiscal sustainability. The bill's approach prioritizes immediate tax relief and program funding over balanced budgets, prompting debates about the potential need for future austerity measures or tax increases to stabilize federal finances. Economic growth projections and differing expert analyses. Economic forecasts related to the bill vary widely. Supporters predict accelerated GDP growth exceeding 3% annually, driven by increased consumer spending and business investment resulting from tax reductions. They argue that deregulation and incentives for innovation will boost productivity and job creation. Conversely, many economists caution that the bill's contribution to rising deficits could trigger higher interest rates and inflation, dampening growth prospects. Some analyses warn of a potential slowdown after an initial stimulus effect fades. The debate reflects contrasting views on the balance between fiscal stimulus and debt management, with uncertainty about how global economic conditions might interact with domestic policy changes. How the bill affects low-income Americans versus the wealthy. The bill's provisions create a disparate impact across income groups. Low-income Americans face cuts to social safety net programs like SNAP and Medicaid, reducing access to essential services. At the same time, tax relief measures disproportionately benefit higher earners through expanded deductions and lower marginal rates. While some middle-income families receive modest tax credits, the wealthiest households gain the largest absolute tax savings. This divergence raises concerns about increasing income inequality and social mobility barriers. Advocates for equity argue that the bill prioritizes fiscal conservatism over poverty alleviation, whereas supporters claim that economic growth spurred by tax cuts will eventually benefit all strata of society. Energy sector incentives and restrictions under the bill. The bill enacts major revisions to energy tax incentives, particularly targeting clean energy projects. It accelerates the repeal of key clean electricity tax credits, such as the production tax credit and investment tax credit, requiring qualifying projects to begin construction within 60 days of enactment and be operational by 2028 to receive full benefits. Nuclear energy projects receive more favorable treatment, with extended eligibility for credits if construction starts before 2029. The bill also eliminates tax credits for electric vehicles, clean hydrogen, and energy efficiency improvements. Additionally, it imposes stringent restrictions on foreign involvement in energy projects, aiming to enhance national security. Political controversy and divisions within the Republican Party. The bill exposed significant rifts within the Republican Party, with some members opposing it due to concerns over spending increases and the impact on entitlement programs. While the legislation passed largely along party lines, a narrow margin in both chambers reflected internal disagreements about fiscal priorities and policy direction. Some conservatives criticized the bill for expanding government programs and increasing the national debt, while others supported it for its tax cuts and deregulation measures. The absence of Democratic support intensified partisan tensions, highlighting the polarized nature of contemporary U.S. politics. Implications for state and local tax deductions. The legislation modifies the treatment of state and local tax deductions, which have been a contentious issue in federal tax policy. It increases the SALT deduction cap, allowing taxpayers in high-tax states to deduct a larger portion of their state and local taxes from federal taxable income. This change aims to provide relief to residents of states with higher tax burdens, such as New York and California, and addresses criticisms that the previous cap disproportionately affected these taxpayers. However, the adjustment is phased in gradually and includes income thresholds, limiting benefits for the wealthiest filers. Potential long-term effects on America's fiscal stability. The bill's expansive tax cuts and spending provisions are projected to exacerbate federal deficits and increase the national debt substantially over the next decade. While proponents argue economic growth stimulated by the bill will help offset fiscal imbalances, independent analyses warn of rising interest costs and pressure on entitlement programs. The growing debt burden could constrain future government flexibility, necessitating difficult choices on spending cuts or tax increases. Additionally, the bill's reduction of clean energy incentives may slow investments in sustainable infrastructure, potentially increasing long-term economic and environmental risks. Public and voter reactions to the bill's passage and provisions. Public response to the bill has been mixed and highly polarized. Supporters praise the permanent tax cuts, increased child tax credits, and deregulation as beneficial for economic growth and family finances. However, many voters express concern over cuts to social programs like Medicaid and SNAP, fearing increased hardship for vulnerable populations. Polls indicate sharp partisan divides, with Republicans generally approving the legislation and Democrats strongly opposing it. Advocacy groups for low-income and environmental causes have mobilized protests and campaigns against the bill's provisions. The legislation's narrow passage margin reflects this contentious public sentiment, which may influence upcoming elections and policy debates. Thanks for watching. The big, beautiful bill could reshape America's financial future for better or worse. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let us know your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into the policies shaping our world.